On WNIN Lawmakers this week, our guest is Indiana State Senator Jim Toms. We'll also get an update from the Indiana General Assembly. That's coming up next on WNIN. Welcome to WNIN Lawmakers. I'm John Gibson, news manager and local host of WNIN FM's Morning Edition. Our guest this week is Indiana State Senator Jim Toms. But before we speak with Senator Toms, let's check in with Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brian Smith. He's got this report on the week at the State House.
Hoosiers rallied against a bill that would ban transgender girls from girls' high school sports, saying it harms trans students. That demonstration came in advance of a Senate committee hearing on the measure. The bill's future isn't certain, but it appears likely to advance. Indiana's 2013 criminal justice reform law aimed to keep people convicted of low-level nonviolent felonies out of the prison system and into local community corrections. But many counties don't have adequate mental health and addiction treatment programs for those offenders, so a bill this year would allow judges to send some of those convicted of low-level felonies into the Department of Correction, which says it has such programs available. And with nursing shortages at crisis levels, lawmakers want to relax some policies at nursing schools, making it easier to hire part-time faculty and replace some clinical training working with real patients with simulation programs. Hospital systems support the changes, but many nursing school leaders say they will weaken standards too much. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
Joining us now is Indiana State Senator Jim Toms, who represents Posey County and portions of Gibson and Vanderburgh County. Thank you for joining us today, Senator Toms.
You're welcome.
Good to have you here. Well, we were chatting just before we went on about that you've been hearing a lot from constituents this session. It's a short session, but you're hearing a lot more than usual. Is that right?
It is. For me, anyway, I've had more traffic on the emails and phone calls than I've ever seen in my 12 years up there. And what's interesting about it is we usually always have maybe 3 or 4 hot topic bills going, and we do now this time too as well. But I'm getting emails and calls on other bills, and it's interesting that people apparently is looking through the bill list and finding things that really affect them, and they're calling and emailing about it. And then a lot of these bills, I'm not on those committees, so I have to look some of those bills up to see what the bill is about.
What are some of the bills that you're hearing about, more than others?
Well, right now the bill we're hearing mostly about is 1134. We have the constitutional carry bill that's generated a lot of activity and bills like that, and then this one that was just announced about the transgender. That's the House bill that was in committee in education, which I'm not on a committee, but those bills have brought in a lot of people to the State House to speak on it and testify. But then there's these little ones on the side. It's just something that affects them,
Sure. All right, well, you mentioned House Bill 1134. Let's talk about that one a little bit. It would require some educational materials to be posted online. It received some pushback in the House, but ultimately passed. A similar bill didn't get very far in the Senate. What are your thoughts on that whole idea?
Well, you mean like 167, the bill you're talking about?
Yeah, the one that would have been the Senate version of the educational materials.
I don't know how much identical it was to this 1134, but now that this House bill is over on the Senate side, and we haven't even discussed it in caucus. We had no caucus this past week. I'm certain it will be up Monday when we're back in session. I get a lot of calls on it, a lot of emails. I've had people in my office to talk about it. And I understand that there's components of the bill that are good. I'm not sure that this bill doesn't have way more in it than what it needs. And so when I'm getting these calls, I've had conversations with some of the teachers that's come up to the State House and been in my office, and I've enjoyed that. I've told them that I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some amendments to this bill. It's going to undergo some changes, and I don't know yet the changes, what they might be, but I think, and I couldn't really give them exact answers because I don't know what the bill will look like when those changes are made. But
You say some parts of it you like. Does it concern you at all that parents would get to sort of pick and choose what parts of the curriculum their kids participate in? How much input do you think they should have?
Well, I think parents should have a lot of input. It's their children. I will stand firm on that. But again, like I said, in making a bill and developing this thing, it's got to be done in a manner that it doesn't complicate things more than they already are. And so on that part, I'm not sure that will be addressed in the Senate too, on account of when it was brought to me by some of the teachers, if they were to post some of their curriculum in the course of a day or so, that may change, and would there be time enough to make those changes if it was posted on a website or something? So I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion, and I know a lot of the senators have got their own perspective on this from their districts as well, and I'm interested in seeing how we will maybe change this bill to make it a little better.
Have the teachers expressed concerns to you about how much time it would take, or
Yes.
how much it would sort of throw everything into chaos if they have to update the curriculum perhaps daily?
Right, and that's what I said. I firmly believe that in bills like this here, the intentions are well made. I mean, they're trying to make something better, and I know we've had a lot of discussion over this last year I should say, about what's being taught in the schools, and parents, I think, have found, since their kids were doing their schoolwork at home, they've seen things that they didn't know about, and so it's brought a lot of attention to it. It's brought a lot of discussion, and as a result, then there's been bills proposed. But we're taking on a pretty significant task here, and my perspective is that's great if you want to look at these things, but if you put too much in this bill, if you're trying to take on too much at one time, you might get lost in all of the discussion, and you lose what you really should be focused on. And I think it might be the case here. We'll see what we do with it next week.
All right. Well, across the country and here in Indiana, there is legislation being created that would ban transgender athletes from competing in female athletics in school. What are your thoughts on the Indiana bill, this state's version of that bill?
Yeah, I haven't read that bill from cover to cover. I did watch a little bit of the testimony in Education Committee this past Wednesday. A lot of people up there to speak on it.
Right.
Most of what I get back is from parents talking about, for the girls, when a transgender boy would compete in their sporting events, this is what I'm being told, they're setting records that the girls may never ever set, and they feel that they're not going to ever have a chance to make a mark in a significant score on a particular sporting event. Those are the things I'm hearing mostly about this, and again, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of discussion for this coming week, and since the bill did get a hearing, now I don't think it took a vote. I think it was just a hearing.
Right. I believe that's it's just still up for debate. Of course, it affects this bill would only affect the female students. Why not the other way around?
Well, that was brought up, and that was just mentioned, and we had one little meeting with the chairmans, and that was some of the discussion that was brought up, and there was no answer for that, but it was a thought that was presented. So again, I'm sure it's going to have to be addressed. I mean, you've got to wonder, okay, you're only getting part of the bill addressed here. It would require what would be the fix on the other side of this thing. What would be the answers to that?
In other words, transgender students who were born male. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, we will see.
It's very interesting things that we're dealing with. I'm just telling you, and the discussions are intense, and the interest in this is very sincere. People are wanting to make sure we do the right thing with these things, but it's got to be done properly.
Well, let's talk about Senate Bill 17. It's a bill that you authored.
Right.
It would remove so-called harmful materials at school libraries. It has passed the Senate, as I understand it, and is in the Indiana House now. Essentially, tell us what you mean there by harmful materials. What do you consider to be harmful?
Well, the state has already established that in our state Indiana Code, Indiana Code 35-49-2. It clearly stipulates what materials harmful to minors is. The bill only addresses K through 12. We didn't get into universities or colleges. The bill does not change existing law in any way. It doesn't change the process or the charges or the penalties. None of that was touched. It only went in and struck the word educational out of the defenses for a book, that it cannot be defended by saying this material is educational. And it's noteworthy too that in our state statute in this issue, it lists 4 categories of what would make something harmful to minors, materials harmful to minors. 4 categories. And for a book to meet that standard, which is a pretty high standard, it has to meet all 4 of them, not 3 or 2 or 1, all 4 of those standards. And that's a high mark for a book to be considered harmful to minors. It doesn't address your historical literary books that have novels and books that have been out there for many, many years, are readily acceptable. Even books that addresses maybe some sexual content. But this bill is going after the books that are absolutely pure 100% raw pornographic. And it doesn't affect, I know people are using examples of Catcher in the Rye or To Kill a Mockingbird. None of that was considered in it because none of those would meet that criteria.
Do we know, are there books like that in school libraries right now? Ones that are 100% pornography as you see it?
I had families across the state have come to me. They come to me last year, and the bill didn't make it out of the out of the Education Committee, but we did make it through the Senate. But these families, like I said last year, more and more parents were able to find out about some of these books. And I wanted to understood that this is not entirely the whole state, and it's not rampant, but there are hot spots across the state, and these books do show up. And these families have presented brochures and folders of some of the books that's been found. They've categorized these books, and they even presented 3 books for examples for me in case anybody on a committee would like to see these, what we're talking about, and some have asked that. I've had people in my office wanted to see a copy of one of these books. I've showed them that. So they do exist, but it's not widespread, it's just out there. And we got to note too, that if somebody were to do this, present these books to these kids of this age bracket outside the school, that law pertains to that. Well, it would also pertain if it's done inside the walls of a school or a library.
How would it be enforced? I mean, what kind of penalties could there be?
Well, the process is, like I said, we're not changing the way the process is done. The way and by the way, this law has been in effect for 40 years, or almost, since 1983, almost 40 years. If someone were to bring this to the attention of a prosecuting attorney in their county, that attorney, this is the process, how it is, how it has always been, would look at that book and look at the criteria, and if it would meet that standard, could possibly bring a case forward. And it carries a felony, a level felony crime with it. But it's still, even if somebody suggests that this is what they think this book meets that criteria, the prosecuting attorney would make that determination. Your county prosecutor would know if it does, and if it doesn't, it wouldn't.
So in other words, a school library or a librarian could be charged with a felony if it's ruled, that it meets that criteria?
If they, and also it has to be intentional. It's just, there's a very slim margin on how this would be applied. But someone would be responsible for this. I mean, providing these books accessible to these kids or putting it in their hands. So.
All right, well, we will keep an eye on that, of course. Let's move on to some other issues. As I understand it, every Indiana taxpayer will be given a $125 rebate this year. The state government is required to return funds to the taxpayers if the state surplus is over a certain amount. As you see it, I mean, should the tax rates also go down, or is there a better use for the surplus as you see it?
Well, I've had comments on that and calls too.
Yeah.
Others would like to see that money applied to where we could use it in other areas that need funding. Mm-hmm. That's a good consideration. I have a lot of calls, I shouldn't say a lot, but I have several calls of people worried and complaining about their tax assessments and their property tax bills. Mm-hmm. I don't know if $125 will answer that concern, but I just took a position of listening to what everybody has to say and weighing it out, and a lot of the suggestions made sense to me about, like I said, as far as instead of sending that money back, $125 per person, maybe that money together in a larger sum would be more beneficial to a community if it was applied some other way.
So you'd be open to the idea of not doing the rebate?
I think so. I think if it would maybe be more beneficial, and I think the discussion should come up about how we could do that. Again, on your property taxes, one time $125, I don't know, I mean, $125 is a significant amount of money in my books, but still, if it could be something that would save me more money in another way we would apply that money, I would say we ought to think about that.
I see. Yes, $125 is pretty significant for those of us in public
Doggone right it
broadcasting
is.
as well. Yes, indeed. All right, well, let's talk about Senate Bill 388. It would not allow foreign businesses ownership of agricultural land in the state. It's passed the Senate, as I understand it. It's in a committee now in the Indiana House. Is this a problem? Have we seen examples of foreign business ownership of agricultural land, or is this an idea to prevent it before it perhaps happens?
I guess Senator Mesmer had the bill, and I guess maybe that has been happening where foreign investors that have acquired land here would sell it to another foreign entity. And I think the idea is that there is a lot of foreign investment in our land across the state and across the country, particularly farmland. And there's a significant amount of land that is owned by other nations. And some of them own enough. I've read some of the magazines that, like, for example, I think it's Montana cattle farmers, but where there's been reports of how much land is owned by these different nations. Some of them own enough land that they can produce enough produce on the land they own that they don't have to import from us. And that was kind of eye-opening. I didn't realize there was that much land that has been purchased, not just only purchased, but they own it, lock, stock, and barrel.
Right.
So I think this bill here was a good measure to maybe track to see who owns our land and where it's going to if they sell it. So I thought it was a good measure.
So you support that. While we're speaking about agriculture, perhaps you've heard there's been an avian flu outbreak in Du Bois County on a farm there. And they've had to kill a bunch of the turkeys there. So far, surrounding farms have tested negative so far. Has the Agriculture Committee been briefed on this yet? Do you have any news on that by chance?
No, John, we haven't done any bills on that or anything like that. That's just surface, but that has come up. We are aware it's on the radar screen, and throughout the years, every now and then something like this will come up in the animal agriculture, whether it's with swine or we even had it with wildlife, the deer we have. So we'll see where that goes to and what steps will have to be taken on that.
But I assume you're monitoring that situation?
Yeah, yes, it's on the agriculture, and the Indiana Farm Bureau. They're watching this as well. So
very good, very good. Well, let's move on to a problem that a lot of folks are dealing with, and that would be inflation. Gas prices, grocery prices, pretty high. In January, it rose 7.5% from the previous January. With the continued rising cost of living, how do we address that? Would you entertain an idea of raising the minimum wage, perhaps?
I've never been against raising the minimum wage. we've seen last year, though, the public took care of that themselves. I mean, we've seen signs for help wanted and $15 per hour in Burger Kings and things like that. And that's a pretty significant increase in minimum wage. As far as making something in law, I've always supported maybe raising the minimum wage, trying to get it up to a higher level. But we do that, I always want to be sure that we take everybody in consideration, you know, small businesses in particular. A monumental jump, maybe a $5 or $6 jump, would be pretty hard perhaps on some of the smaller operators, businesses, restaurants, something like that. But I
thought maybe a more gradual approach?
Something maybe done in maybe a 2-year cycle, you know, like if you would set an increase of maybe $3 or $4 over 2 years, it's not it's not going to put anybody up there with a Rockefeller level, but it would increase that hourly and that weekly wage, and it's moving in the right direction. And it wouldn't be a sticker shock for the small businesses. They could be adjusting for that. They could be prepared for that. We don't want to do something that would require or that would encourage an employer to say, well, with that kind of wage, I'm going to have to lay off 2 or 3 people. I think it could be something needed to consider, because it could happen that way. But to start moving the needle up a little bit, incrementally, it would be in a fashion that everybody would be adjusting to it as it goes and make appropriate changes in the way they do their business. I think we could do that.
You could support that?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, let's talk about energy a little bit. We have a few minutes left here. Senate Bill 271 would pave the way for small modular nuclear reactors to be built by utility companies. Can you tell us about that? Essentially, what is a small nuclear reactor? Are you in support of that approach?
Well, I think so. I think we have a facility here in Posey County that makes those, and I've read and I've heard about and been in discussions about those nuclear reactors, and they are pretty effective. I think it's something that we ought to consider. I've told everybody, I don't think there's anybody that does not know I support coal, because it does provide a nice comfort in the room we're in right here. Their lights are burning as a result. And I know the coal industry has done a lot in reducing their emissions. They have made, and we have toured a lot of our coal mines over the years. But when alternative energies, I think this is something noteworthy. I think this is something we should look at very closely to see how well it could be implemented in producing the comfort that we all enjoy so much.
Well, let's getting back to the high costs of some things. We talked about groceries and gasoline. Is there any legislation this year, anything that could be done to address the cost of prescription drugs?
I think we have a bill, a Senate bill that was, I don't remember the number on it, but in fact, I think the Senate sent out a press release notifying all of the medical industry that that we expect some serious reductions in medical costs with prescription medicines and things like that. So, yeah, I think over the years it's safe to assume that a lot of people is doing well on the prescription side of this.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see our citizens be able to get a break on the medicines that they so dearly need.
All right, well, here's another one of those hot button questions, I suppose. Every bill that would either legalize or decriminalize marijuana in Indiana has been struck down, even after receiving some bipartisan support. Do you think Indiana should legalize marijuana in any way?
I get a lot of people they call me, they come to me about this. This thing's evolving. I think in 2012 maybe, Senator Talion, she would bring this issue up. It's always just the one bill, her bill, about legalizing. This year there was 7 on the House side, 7 bills, and 6 on the Senate side. It's trending. Myself, I don't support legalizing marijuana. I do believe that there's probably some in medical aspects of it that it does lend itself, but I've never had anybody be able to tell me, how do you control the abuse of it? I don't know that.
So you wouldn't support even sort of a medical marijuana type?
No, because I just don't think it would be able. Now, I did push hard for 4 years to get the CBD oil passed, which was not. It's not marijuana, not like in terms of it doesn't have the effect of getting a person a high. But I know there was people concerned about this would be the stepping stone to getting that, but that was totally different than what we're talking about right now. One interesting thing, I have a lot of veterans call and ask me about supporting it. And I tell them, well, you know, for those of you who like hunting or shooting, things like that, you might want to look at Form 4473. That's the federal form on buying a gun, the transfer of firearm. And there's a line in there, I think it's line E on that form, that asks you specifically if you use marijuana. Mm-hmm. Or have you used marijuana? And then it warns you that even if your state has legalized it, it's not legally federally.
Right.
Okay, so if you answer no, you're probably looking at a prison sentence on that for lying on that form. And if you answer yes, you're not going to get the firearm. It's, you know, so I just want to tell people, be careful what you're doing here. Make sure you know that that's just one component.
Right.
Make sure you are understanding what you're doing with this measure. And I personally, I think we have enough drugs right now.
All right, well, in just the closing minute or two we have here, anything else that you're working on at the Senate that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I had several bills I introduced, but none of them had made it. I had one that I thought was important with the scrap dealers, the scrap yards, and that buy these used cars that come in for scrap metal. Mm-hmm. They were asking to, right now they have to have a title or a form or certificate that would show a trace on where that car came from, and they were asking that it would just apply to cars that are newer than 15 years. 15 years and older, they wouldn't require all that paper because it's a lot of problem for the tow trucks that bring them in and the salvage yards themselves. Bills like that, people won't know about them, but for that industry, it was important. And
so maybe next year on that one.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll have to wrap it up there. Thanks again for being with us this week, Senator Toms. Next week, our scheduled guest is Indiana State Representative Ryan Hatfield. I'm John Gibson of WNIN FM. Thanks for joining us for WNIN Lawmakers.